My mother-in-law poured something strange into my drink when she thought I was not looking. "A special cocktail for my favorite son-in-law," she said with a smile. I thanked her and discreetly switched glasses with her husband Gerald, who never missed an opportunity to criticize my career. 45 minutes later, he was pale, sweating, and running to the bathroom. "My name is Julian Mercer, 32 years old, an independent photographer based in Asheville, North Carolina. I built my business from nothing: weddings, wildlife, magazine spreads, the kind of work that pays the bills if you're good at it. And I am. But to my in-laws, especially Diane, it was never enough. How's the little photography hobby?" Gerald would sneer at family dinners, not even bothering to hide his disdain. He was an investment banker, the type of man who measured success in square footage and stock options. Every Sunday dinner at their house was the same. Diane fussed over her daughter, while Gerald grilled me about finances, and my wife, Haley, squeezed my hand under the table, silently apologizing for her parents. I had just returned from a wildlife assignment in Montana, trudging through knee-deep snow to photograph bison for National Geographic. Exhausted, I wanted nothing more than a rest, but Haley insisted we could not miss her mother's birthday dinner. "Just a couple of hours," she promised. I should have trusted the knot in my stomach when Diane cornered me in the kitchen, her eyes darting nervously before handing me that drink, her fingers trembling as she said, "I made it special just for you." Something was off. 6 years earlier, Haley and I had met at an art exhibition where my work was displayed. She was finishing her master's in environmental science, and I was just beginning to make a name for myself. We connected instantly. She understood my need to capture the world through a lens, and I admired her passion for protecting it. Her parents, however, were a different story. From the first meeting, Gerald made it clear he had expected someone else for his daughter. Someone with a desk job, a retirement plan, and a company car. Someone exactly like him. Diane was more subtle, praising my photos while asking when I planned to settle down into something stable. At family functions, she would introduce me as the photographer instead of her son-in-law. For years, I tried to win him over with expensive wine, published work, and mentions of high-profile clients, but nothing changed their perception that I was just passing to their daughter's life, a phase she would outgrow. Last Christmas, I overheard Diane telling someone Haley could have married Thomas, the orthopedic surgeon with family money, but she chose a creative one. The way she lingered on creative made it sound like a disease. Gerald was even more blunt. When Haley and I shared that we were trying for a baby, he pulled me aside. "Children are expensive, son. Maybe think about real employment before bringing one into the world." I never told Haley. She loved her parents despite their flaws, and I did not want her to feel torn. So I smiled, shook Gerald's hand firmly, complimented Diane's cooking, and kept my thoughts to myself. But the signs were there. The way Diane would ask Haley to help in the kitchen whenever I mentioned a successful project, how she forgot to include me in family photos, and the time Gerald suggested therapy for Haley's impulsive decisions while glaring at me. I ignored it all, hoping time would soften them. I was wrong. On Diane's birthday, I came straight from Montana, still raw-cheeked from the cold, but showered and dressed for dinner. The evening began as usual, Gerald bragging about business, Diane fussing over the table, and Haley's brother and sister-in-law making polite conversation. After the main course, Diane proudly announced her famous sangria and disappeared into the kitchen. I followed to help and saw her quickly slip something colorless and odorless from a vial into one glass. "Oh, Julian, I've got this," she said too brightly. "This one's for you. Special recipe for my favorite son-in-law." My throat tightened. I noticed a faint film floating on the surface. Calmly, I offered to carry the drinks. Back at the table, I placed a tampered glass in front of Gerald, claiming I preferred water with dessert. Minutes later, he was violently ill. Diane's face drained as her eyes met mine, and in that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. My mother-in-law had tried to poison me, and she knew that I knew. I stayed silent, calmly eating my cake, while Haley rushed to her father. Amid the chaos of Gerald insisting it must have been food poisoning and Diane stammering about bad shellfish, I quietly pocketed the untouched glass meant for me. The anger I felt was not hot or explosive. It was cold, calculated. I would not fight their way, but I would make them face who they truly were. The following Monday, I brought the glass to Jason, a former client who ran a toxicology lab. Personal or professional? He asked when I explained. Family matter, I replied. 3 days later, he called. Julian, there were benzodiazepines in that drink. Not lethal, but enough to knock someone out for hours, maybe because memory loss. Where did you get this? I thanked him and asked for a written report, but did not answer his question. That night, I told Haley I needed to skip Sunday dinners for a while, claiming I was focused on an upcoming exhibition. She was disappointed, but understood. I did not tell her about the test results. Not yet. I needed more. Over the next 2 weeks, I dug deeper and discovered Diane had prescriptions for Xanax from 3 different doctors, doubling and tripling her doses for years. Rumors in town painted a darker picture. Erratic behavior at parties, accusations of theft at her country club, scandals her family worked hard to bury. I compiled everything and waited. My chance came when Haley mentioned her mother wanted new photos for a social media profile and specifically asked me to take them. Surprised but willing, I agreed. That Saturday, I arrived at their home alone, camera bag in one hand, a sealed envelope in the other. Diane was waiting, dressed expensively, makeup flawless. Gerald's at the office, she said. Before we started, I quietly handed her the envelope containing the toxicology report and copies of her prescriptions. Her hands trembled as she read. This is absurd, she whispered. I would never. We both know what happened. I interrupted. What I don't know is why. Her face hardened. You are not good enough for my daughter. You never will be. A man should provide security, not pictures. My voice was steady as I replied. And drugging your daughter's husband provides security? I kept my voice calm as Diane snapped that it was never going to hurt me, just make me sick enough to miss the gallery opening I had been talking about for months, so Haley would see me as unreliable. I let her words sink in before finally replying that here was what would happen next. She was going to tell Gerald what she did, and then they were both going to start treating me with respect, not because they suddenly changed their minds about me, but because the alternative was Haley finding out exactly who her parents really were. Diane laughed, but it was hollow, insisting Haley would never believe me over them. I picked up my camera bag and told her maybe not, but Haley would believe the lab report, the prescription records, and the neighbors she had alienated, and I asked if she was willing to bet her relationship with her daughter on that. I walked out without taking a single photo. That night Diane called Haley in tears, claiming I behaved inappropriately during our session, saying I had been hostile and threatening. When Haley confronted me, I could no longer hide the truth, so I showed her everything. The lab report, the prescriptions, even the hostile text messages Diane had sent me over the years. Haley kept insisting her mother would never do this, but her voice lacked conviction. The next day she confronted her parents and came home with red, tear-stained eyes, telling me her father claimed it was all a misunderstanding and that I was trying to drive a wedge between them because I was insecure about my career. I simply nodded, because I had expected this. But when I asked her what she thought, she said nothing and just turned away from me in bed. Somehow, despite everything, I had fallen deeper into their trap, painted as a villain, while they managed to plant doubt in the one person who mattered most. For 2 weeks, Haley barely spoke to me, spending time with her parents and returning with fresh doubts. I buried myself in work, waiting for the storm to pass, until one day a package arrived with no return address. Just my name scrawled across the top. Inside was a USB drive and a note from Vanessa, Owen's wife, telling me I should see this. The drive contained home security footage from Gerald and Diane's house, recorded on the night of the dinner. I watched Diane clearly add something to a drink, saw myself walk in and take the glasses, then Gerald drink from the tampered one. But the footage continued after we left, showing Diane screaming at Gerald for drinking from the wrong glass, and Gerald yelling back, "This isn't the first time you've done something like this." My hands shook as I watched, realizing this was not only proof of what Diane did to me, but evidence of a pattern, and Gerald knew. The next file showed them 2 days later, arguing in their living room about me. Gerald said, "He knows what you did. And Diane coldly replied that it was my word against hers, that Haley would never choose me over her family. And even if she did, she was already planting seeds to make Haley file for divorce and believe it was her own idea. Sick to my stomach, I called Vanessa immediately and asked why she sent it. She admitted they had done the same thing to her, tried to break up her marriage to Owen for years until they finally backed off after she had a child, because a grandchild gave them leverage. The next day, I received a text from Gerald asking to meet man to man at his country club. He poured himself bourbon and started by saying families are complicated, that Diane could be difficult but meant well. I asked him if drugging someone was his definition of meaning well. He waved it off as a misunderstanding, saying Diane took anxiety medication and probably mixed up the glasses. But when I told him I had the footage, his face hardened. He accused me of marrying Haley for money, then asked what I wanted, money? I told him I just wanted them to stop interfering, to stop trying to convince Haley I was not good enough. Gerald leaned in, smirking, and said this was not the first time they had dealt with someone like me, someone trying to take advantage of their family, and that Haley always came home in the end. He told me to ask her about Thomas, the fiancé before me. My blood ran cold as he revealed that Haley had once been engaged to a doctor, but they had convinced her he was wrong for her, manipulated her until she broke it off and came home in tears. Desperate for answers, I called Haley's college roommate Bethany, who confirmed everything. Haley's parents had planted fake evidence of cheating and destroyed her trust in Thomas until she left him. The pattern was undeniable. This was not about me. It was about control, complete control over Haley's life. I began gathering evidence. Emails from Thomas, testimonies from old friends who had mysteriously drifted away, all pointing to the same manipulative pattern. Vanessa sent me more footage of Diane and Gerald discussing their plans for Haley once we divorce, talking about moving her back home, giving her control of the foundation, and introducing her to suitable men. I compiled it all onto OneDrive and invited Owen and Vanessa over for dinner without telling Haley. Over dessert, I connected my laptop to the TV and showed them everything. For an hour, we watched the footage, the emails, the conversations. Haley sat pale and motionless, tears streaming down her face, while Owen muttered that it could not be real, that his parents would never do this. But Vanessa placed a hand on his arm and said they had done it to her too, only easing up when they had James, their son, because it gave them leverage. Owen's face drained of color as the truth sank in. Later that night, Haley turned to me in bed and whispered that she needed time to process it all, but she believed me now and was sorry for doubting me. The next morning, Diane called Haley, sounding cheerful, suggesting she come stay with them for a while to clear her head. Haley cut her off, telling her she had seen the videos of Diane drugging my drink and of them plotting against our marriage. Diane tried to twist it, claiming I had manipulated the footage, but Haley firmly said they were coming over as a family that evening to discuss everything face to face. That night, we arrived with Owen and Vanessa, and I brought my camera equipment. Gerald greeted us, smugly insisting there had been a misunderstanding, but I interrupted, setting up a tripod and saying I was documenting the conversation for the family archives. Diane immediately objected, saying this was private family business, and I agreed, exactly, family business, and I was family, even if they had tried so hard to deny it. For the next 2 hours, we laid out everything. The poisoned drink, the manipulations, Thomas, the ex-boyfriends, the years of control. Gerald and Diane denied it all, calling me unstable and manipulative. But with each denial, I played another clip, another email, another piece of undeniable truth. Their faces grew paler, their excuses weaker. Finally, Haley stood, saying she loved them, but what they had done was unforgivable, and they no longer had control over her life. Owen backed her, saying they were adults now and would choose their own paths. Diane cried, not from remorse, but from the realization that her grip was slipping, while Gerald sat stunned, unable to comprehend that his children were defying him. As we prepared to leave, I handed Gerald a USB drive, telling him it contained everything, the footage, the emails, the testimonies, and that it was his to keep. He narrowed his eyes suspiciously and asked what that was supposed to mean. It means I'm not going to ruin your reputation by sharing this with anyone else. That would hurt Haley, and I would never do that. I paused and added, But if you ever try to interfere in our marriage again, if you ever try to manipulate Haley or speak against me, copies will go to every member of your country club, your business partners, and your precious social circle." For the first time since I'd met him, Gerald looked at me with something resembling respect. "I underestimated you," he said. "Yes," I replied simply. "You did." 6 months passed, and Haley and Owen began therapy to work through the damage their parents had caused. Diane and Gerald kept their distance, sending occasional texts, but respecting the boundaries we'd established. Then, over the holidays, they invited us all to dinner. The invitation read, "A fresh start." Haley wanted to go. "They're still my parents," she said softly, "and they're trying." I agreed, but I wasn't naive enough to believe they had truly changed. When we arrived, everything seemed normal. Diane had prepared a feast, and Gerald was charming, even asking about my latest projects with what seemed like genuine interest. After dinner, Gerald invited me into his study. Pouring a scotch, he said, "I have a proposition for you. I've been thinking about your career. Photography has been good to you. Sure, but have you considered diversifying? I could bring you into my firm, junior partner track. The salary would be substantial." I took the glass but didn't drink. "Why would you do that?" I asked. "You're a family," he said smoothly, "and I respect how you handle the unpleasantness. You protected my daughter while standing your ground. That's what a real man does." I set the glass down untouched. "I appreciate the offer, but no." His smile tightened. "Julian, be reasonable. This is an olive branch, a way for us to move forward." "No," I repeated. "It's another attempt at control. You can't buy me, Gerald, and you can't stand the fact that Haley loves me exactly as I am." His face hardened. "Don't be a fool," he hissed, dropping the facade. "Everyone has a price." I stood up. "That's where you're wrong. And that's why you'll never understand your daughter." I walked back to the dining room, where Diane was showing Haley old photo albums. "Look at these," she was saying. "You were so happy when you lived at home." Haley caught my eye across the room, saw the expression on my face, and stood up. "Mom, Dad," she announced clearly, "I have something to tell you." Everyone turned to look at her. "We're having a baby. Julian and I. I'm 3 months pregnant." The shock on their faces was genuine. Diane recovered first, rushing to embrace her daughter with tears in her eyes. Gerald approached more slowly, glancing between Haley and me. "Congratulations," he said stiffly. "Thank you," I replied, then leaned in so only he could hear. "This child will never be a pawn in your games. I promise you that." His face hardened, but he nodded once. He understood the message. On the drive home, Haley squeezed my hand. "They'll never change, will they?" "No," I said honestly, "but they'll have to accept that we have." 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived from Gerald's attorney. Inside was the deed to our house, the one we'd been renting, and legal documents establishing a trust fund for our unborn child. There was no note, no conditions, no strings. Just a transfer of assets, clean and irrevocable. It wasn't an apology. Gerald wasn't capable of that. But it was an acknowledgement, perhaps the only one he could give, that we had won. Our daughter was born in the summer. We named her Eliza, after my grandmother. When Diane and Gerald came to the hospital, they brought gifts but kept a respectful distance. They cooed over the baby, took photos, and left without trying to give us parenting advice or financial lectures. As the months passed, our relationship with them settled into something resembling normal. They never apologized for what they'd done, but they stopped trying to control Haley's life or undermine my career. One evening, as I was editing photos in my studio, Haley came in carrying Eliza. "My mother called," she said. "She wants us to come for Christmas." I looked up from my computer. "What do you want to do?" "I think we should go," she said, "but with conditions. We stay at a hotel, not their house. We leave when we want to leave. And no unsupervised time with Eliza." I nodded. "Sounds reasonable." She sat beside me, bouncing the baby gently. "You know, I used to think success meant making my parents happy, getting their approval, meeting their expectations. But now," she looked down at Eliza, then back at me. "Now I know it's about making choices I can be proud of, standing by the people I love. 2 weeks before Christmas, a large envelope arrived from Gerald. Inside was a glossy brochure for his company's annual report. My photographs were featured throughout: landscapes, portraits, architectural shots, the work I'd done on my own terms, without his interference. There was a brief note: "Hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy." It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It was something else. Respect, perhaps. The acknowledgement that I was successful on my own terms, not his. I didn't call to thank him. We both understood this wasn't about gratitude. It was about recognizing the new boundaries, the new reality. That spring, I opened my own gallery in downtown Asheville. At the grand opening, Haley stood beside me with Eliza on her hip. My parents flew in from Oregon, and friends and clients filled the space, admiring the images I'd captured over the years. Gerald and Diane came too. Toward the end of the evening, they didn't stay long. Diane held Eliza briefly under Haley's watchful eye. Gerald shook my hand, nodded at the photographs with genuine approval, and left without making any suggestions about how I should run my business. As we locked up that night, Haley asked, "Do you think they've changed?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally, "but they've accepted that they can't change us. And sometimes that's enough." Later, as we sat on our porch watching the stars come out over the mountains, Eliza asleep in her crib upstairs, I realized something I'd never fully articulated before. I hadn't won by playing Gerald and Diane's game. I'd won by refusing to play it at all. I had stood my ground, protected what mattered, and built my life according to my own definition of success. Not with schemes or manipulation, but with honesty and quiet persistence. In the end, that was the most satisfying revenge of all, living well on my own terms with the family I loved beside me,